The house felt unusually still that evening, the kind of silence that only comes after years of noise. Claire walked through the hallway, her footsteps echoing softly against the wooden floor. The rain outside had been falling since morning, tapping gently on the windows, making everything feel slower, calmer, lonelier. She carried a cup of tea to the living room, but by the time she sat down, the tea was already cold. She didn't even notice that her husband, Daniel, had left early that morning for a week-long business trip. They had been married for 12 years, and she was used to his travels, but this time the distance felt heavier. Maybe because things between them hadn't been the same lately. They spoke politely, shared dinners, laughed sometimes, but something inside their marriage had grown quiet, like a song that had once played loudly and now only hummed faintly in the background. Ethan, their 9-year-old son, sat cross-legged on the carpet, building something with his Lego set. His little world was made of color and imagination, and Claire smiled watching him. He was such a calm child, thoughtful, gentle to mature sometimes. She wondered if he noticed the way she and Daniel had drifted apart. Children saw things more clearly than adults like to believe. The thunder rolled in the distance. Claire leaned back, listening to the soft sound of Ethan humming to himself. It reminded her of when Daniel used to hum while cooking breakfast. Those mornings were bright and warm. She missed that. She missed how alive the house used to feel. "Mom." Ethan's voice broke her thoughts. He looked up at her, his brown eyes wide and curious. "Do you ever feel lonely when Dad's not here?" Claire blinked, surprised by the question. "What makes you ask that?" she said gently. Ethan shrugged. "I don't know. You look sad sometimes when you think I'm not watching." She smiled, touched and slightly embarrassed. "I guess I do miss him," she admitted. "But I have you here, and that helps a lot." Ethan smiled shyly and went back to his Legos. "I like it when it's just us," he said softly. Something about the way he said it made her heart twist a little. Not in pain, but in realization. There was something pure about his words, something honest. She nodded and let the moment pass, but it lingered quietly in her chest. After dinner, they watched a movie together. It was an old family film Ethan loved. He laughed loudly at every joke, leaning against her arm. Claire watched him more than the screen. His laughter filled the space that had felt empty all day. It reminded her how powerful simple moments could be. How love wasn't always about big gestures or perfect relationships. Sometimes it was just sitting on a couch, sharing popcorn with someone who made you forget the world outside. When the movie ended, Ethan was half asleep. She carried him to his room, tucking him under his blanket. His face looked peaceful, soft, and innocent. Standing there, she felt something warm rise in her heart, a quiet gratitude. No matter what was happening between her and Daniel, this child was the best part of both of them. Back in the living room, the rain had turned into a drizzle. The house smelled faintly of popcorn and candle wax. Claire picked up her phone and stared at Daniel's contact name. She thought about calling him, but she didn't know what to say. It wasn't that they had fought, there was no argument, no harsh words. Just distance. The kind that builds silently over time when life gets busy and love turns into routine. She put the phone down and walked to the window. The city lights shimmered in the distance, blurred by raindrops on the glass. For a moment, she let herself imagine Daniel standing beside her, his arm around her shoulder, the way he used to do when they first bought this house. Back then, they talked about everything: dreams, work, their future. They promised never to lose that closeness. But life, she realized, had a way of testing even the strongest promises. As she stood there, she heard small footsteps. Ethan was at the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "Mum, can I sleep with you tonight?" She smiled. Of course, sweetheart. He climbed into her bed, curling up beside her. His little hand searched for hers under the blanket, and she held it tightly. The sound of rain filled the silence between them. For the first time that day, Claire felt calm. She looked at her son's peaceful face and thought about what he'd said earlier, that he liked it when it was just them. There was something beautiful in that. It wasn't loneliness, it was connection. A reminder that love still lived inside these walls. Even when things felt uncertain. Claire closed her eyes, whispering a quiet promise to herself. She would try harder, not just for Daniel, but for Ethan, for herself. Maybe love didn't fade. Maybe it just waited to be noticed again. The night grew deeper, and the rain slowed to a soft whisper. As she drifted towards sleep, Ethan murmured, half dreaming, "Mom, when Dad comes back, can we all watch a movie together?" Claire smiled in the dark. "Yes, honey, we will." And for the first time in a long while, she believed it. The quiet house didn't feel so lonely anymore. It felt like the beginning of something small, warm, and hopeful. The next morning arrived with soft sunlight slipping through the curtains. The storm had passed, and the sky looked clean, calm, and full of promise. Claire woke early, made pancakes, and set the table for two. The house smelled of vanilla and coffee. She wanted the morning to feel light and cheerful, something Ethan would remember. Ethan came down the stairs in his pajamas, his hair messy and his eyes still sleepy. He smiled when he saw breakfast waiting. "You made pancakes?" he said, his voice bright. "Of course," she replied, smiling back. "It's our special day. Just you and me." He grinned, sliding into his chair, and began telling her about a funny dream he'd had. Claire laughed more than she had in days. For a little while, the world felt simple again, like before life got complicated. But even in that warmth, she could feel something unspoken between them. Children always sense when something's off. Even when parents try to hide it. After breakfast, they cleaned up together. Claire washed while Ethan dried the dishes, standing on his little stool beside her. They made a good team. The radio played softly in the background, an old love song Daniel used to hum when they were first married. It brought back so many memories she didn't expect. She caught herself humming along. Ethan noticed. "Mom, that's the song you and Dad used to dance to, right?" She smiled faintly. "You remember that?" "Yeah, you looked happy then." Claire froze for a moment, her hands still under the running water. "What do you mean then?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Ethan shrugged. "You and Dad don't laugh like that anymore. You don't dance either. You used to hug a lot. Now you just talk about bills and work." His words felt like a small crack opening inside her. She turned off the water and looked at him carefully. He wasn't saying it to hurt her. He was saying it because he cared. She knelt beside him and brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "Do you miss that?" she asked softly. He nodded, his eyes serious. "I like it when you're happy. When you laugh, the whole house feels different." She smiled, but her heart ached. "You notice everything, don't you?" "Yeah," he said with a grin. "That's my job. I'm your son." She hugged him tightly, realizing just how much love was inside this little boy. Ethan didn't just love her, he saw her. That kind of love was rare, even between adults. Later that day, while Ethan played in the backyard, Claire sat by the kitchen window watching him. His laughter filled the air, echoing against the fence, pure and free. It made her wonder when she had last laughed like that. When had she last felt light? She thought about her marriage, how somewhere along the way, she and Daniel had stopped trying. It wasn't that they stopped loving each other. They just forgot how to show it. That evening, she made Ethan's favorite dinner pasta with creamy sauce and garlic bread. They ate together at the small table, the candle flickering between them. He told her about a story he was writing for school, about a family that finds its way back to happiness after forgetting what mattered. When he finished, Claire said softly, "That's a beautiful story. How do they find their happiness again?" Ethan grinned. "They start doing the small things again, like having dinner together, talking, saying nice things, and remembering why they love each other." Claire felt her throat tighten. "That's a wise story, Ethan." He shrugged, twirling his pasta. "It's just true." After dinner, they sat on the couch with a blanket. The television played quietly, but Claire wasn't paying attention. She watched her son instead, the calm way he rested his head on her shoulder, the way his eyes softened when he looked at her. He had Daniel's eyes. The thought made her heart squeeze gently. "Mom," he said after a while, "when Dad calls, can you tell him you miss him?" She looked down at him, surprised again by how deeply he understood things. "Why do you say that?" "Because I think he misses you too," Ethan said simply. "He just doesn't know how to say it." Claire didn't answer right away. She just held him closer. In his words, she found a quiet truth she had been afraid to face. Maybe love doesn't end it, just waits for someone to open the door again. When Ethan finally went to bed, she stayed in the living room alone. The lamp cast a warm glow over the framed photos on the wall. One picture caught her eye, Daniel holding Ethan as a baby, both smiling at her. She remembered that day clearly. It was summer, and everything had felt easy. She picked up the photo and whispered, "Where did we lose that?" Her phone buzzed just then, a message from Daniel. "Made it to Chicago safely. Hope you and Ethan are doing okay." For a moment, she just stared at the message. Then she typed back, "We're doing fine. Ethan says hello. He misses you." There was a short pause before his reply came. "Tell him I miss him too. And you." Claire stared at those 3 words and knew. They were simple, but they stirred something inside her. Maybe Ethan was right. Maybe all it took was one small moment of honesty to start finding their way back. She smiled faintly and whispered, "Thank you, Ethan." Upstairs, her son was already asleep, dreaming the kind of dreams that come from peace and love. Claire turned off the lights, her heart a little lighter. For the first time in a long while, she believed things could change. And somewhere inside her, a small hope began to grow, quiet but steady. Like a candle relit after a long night, the weekend arrived with sunlight streaming through the curtains, bright and warm after days of rain. Claire opened the windows, letting in the crisp morning air that smelled faintly of wet grass and new beginnings. For the first time all week, she felt lighter. Something in her had shifted after that conversation with Ethan. His simple words, his gentle honesty had opened her eyes to what truly mattered. Ethan ran into the kitchen wearing his superhero t-shirt, his hair sticking up in every direction. "Morning, Mom," he said cheerfully. "Good morning," Claire replied with a smile. "Guess what? We're baking today." "Cookies?" he asked instantly, his face lighting up. "Of course," she said. "Chocolate chip, just the way you like them." He clapped his hands in excitement. It had been a long time since the house had felt this alive. Claire put on music while they gathered ingredients: flour, butter, sugar, and chocolate chips. An old song began to play through the speaker, one she hadn't heard in years. It was their song, the one Daniel used to sing while spinning her around the kitchen. When they were young, Ethan looked up from the mixing bowl. "Isn't this Dad's song?" Claire hesitated, then smiled softly. "Yes, it's our song." Without thinking, she began humming along, her voice quiet at first, then stronger. Ethan grinned and joined in, completely off key. But it didn't matter. She laughed, a real, carefree laugh that echoed through the kitchen. They danced between the counters, flour flying everywhere, the air filled with music and laughter. For a few minutes, it felt like time had turned back. As the cookies baked, the sweet smell filled the whole house. They sat on the floor together, waiting, their hands dusted with flour. Ethan leaned against her shoulder and sighed happily. "Mom," he said, "you look different today." She looked down at him. "Different how?" "Just happy," he said. "Like before." His words touched her deeply. She realized it wasn't just her heart that needed healing, Ethan's did too. Children feel everything parents hide. She had been carrying quiet sadness for too long, and somehow, her son had been carrying it too. When the oven timer beeped, they jumped up and pulled out the cookies. They were golden and perfect. Ethan broke one in half and handed it to her. "Try it." She took a bite and smiled. "You're officially my baking partner. Forever," he said proudly, holding up his pinky. They locked fingers, sealing the promise. After lunch, they decided to make a small surprise for Daniel. Ethan suggested writing a note and taking a photo of the cookies to send him. Claire agreed. They wrote together on a small card. "We made cookies today. Wish you were here to steal the first one." Ethan drew a little smiley face next to the words. When they took the photo, Ethan insisted she be in it too. "Dad will like it if he sees you smiling," he said. She hesitated, then agreed. They stood side by side, smiling at the camera. She sent the photo to Daniel with the note, not expecting much. A few minutes later, her phone buzzed. Daniel's reply came, "You two made my day. I miss you both more than I can say." She stared at the message for a moment, her throat tightening. It wasn't a grand confession or a romantic speech, but it was honest. It was a start. Ethan peeked at the screen and grinned. "See? He misses you too." Claire smiled faintly, brushing his hair back. "Maybe you're right." That afternoon, they went for a walk around the neighborhood. The sun was warm, and leaves shimmered gold in the breeze. Ethan ran ahead, chasing a butterfly, while Claire followed slowly behind, feeling a kind of peace she hadn't felt in months. She realized that love wasn't always about grand gestures, it was about showing up, about small things that mattered most. When they got home, Ethan flopped onto the couch, tired but happy. "Mom," he said sleepily, "when Dad comes back, can we do this again? All three of us?" Claire smiled. "Yes, sweetheart. I think we will." As he drifted to sleep, she sat beside him, brushing a hand through his hair. She couldn't stop thinking about the way Daniel's text had sounded. Gentle, genuine, a little lonely. It reminded her of the man she had fallen in love with. Maybe they had both just been waiting for a reason to reach out again. Later that evening, she cleaned the kitchen while the sky turned orange outside. She put the rest of the cookies in a jar, labeling it for Dad. It wasn't much, but it felt like a symbol of something new, something hopeful. When she finished, she stood by the window, watching the fading light. The street outside glowed softly, and for the first time, she didn't feel trapped by silence. She felt surrounded by memories that didn't hurt anymore. They just reminded her of where love had started. Her phone buzzed. Again. Another message from Daniel. "That song you played today. I haven't heard it in so long. It made me smile. Maybe when I'm back, we can dance again." Claire read the words slowly, her heart filling with warmth. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a promise. But it was something better. It was hope. She looked toward the couch where Ethan was sleeping, his small chest rising and falling peacefully. "You did this," she whispered softly. "You helped us remember." The room felt alive again, soft, warm, filled with quiet love. The kind that doesn't need to be spoken loudly to be real. Outside, the first stars appeared, twinkling above the rooftops. Claire stood there for a long time, smiling to herself. She didn't know what the next week would bring, but she knew one thing for certain: love was still here. It had just been waiting to be found again. The evening came quietly. The air outside was cool, and a soft breeze moved through the curtains. The house felt different now, lighter, warmer, alive again. Claire sat on the couch with a cup of tea, watching Ethan draw in his sketchbook on the floor. He was humming softly, a tune from the song they had danced to that morning. The sight filled her heart with a calm she hadn't felt in a long time. The clock ticked past 8. Daniel usually called around this time, but tonight, the thought of hearing his voice made her heart beat faster. She wasn't nervous, just uncertain. So much had changed in the past few days. She wanted to tell him everything: the baking, the laughter, the small ways their home had come alive again. She wanted him to feel it too. The phone finally rang. Claire looked at it for a second before answering. "Hey," she said softly. Daniel's voice came through, warm and a little tired. "Hey, you too. How are my favorite people?" Ethan jumped up instantly. "Dad, we made cookies," he said excitedly. Daniel laughed. "You did? Without me?" "You were working," Ethan replied proudly. "Mom said we'd save you some." Claire smiled as she listened to them talk. Their laughter filled the room. It reminded her of how things used to be: simple, happy, full of love. When Ethan handed the phone back to her, she held it gently, her fingers trembling just a little. "So," Daniel said after a pause, "how's everything at home?" "It's been good," she said honestly. "Quiet, but good." "Ethan's been amazing. We spent the day baking and playing music." There was a small silence, then Daniel said softly, "That song you played, the one you sent me a video of, I heard it again today. It brought back so many memories." She smiled, her voice tender. "It brought them back for me too. I miss that," he said after a moment. "I miss us." The words were simple, but they carried a weight she hadn't expected. For a second, she didn't know what to say. She glanced toward Ethan, who was pretending not to listen. His little head bowed over his drawings. She smiled gently and said, "I think Ethan does too. He asked me to tell you something." "Oh, what's that?" "That he misses seeing us laugh together." Daniel's breath caught. "He said that?" "Yes," she whispered. "He notices everything." There was another pause, but this one didn't feel heavy. It felt honest. "He's right," Daniel finally said. "I've been so busy trying to do everything right at work that I forgot what really matters." Claire felt her eyes sting, but she didn't cry. "We both forgot," she admitted. "But maybe it's not too late." "Maybe not," he said quietly. "I'll be home tomorrow night, Claire. Maybe we can start over a little." She smiled through the warmth rising in her chest. "I'd like that." They talked for a while longer about work, about school, about small, everyday things that suddenly felt meaningful again. The distance between them, once so wide, began to close with every word. When the call finally ended, she sat still for a moment, her phone resting in her lap, her heart full. Ethan looked up from his drawings. "Is Dad coming home soon?" "Yes," she said softly, smiling. "Tomorrow night." He grinned. "Can we bake something again? Maybe a cake this time?" "Sure," she said, ruffling his hair. "We'll make it special." As Ethan went to wash up before bed, Claire stayed in the living room, the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint rustle of the trees outside surrounding her. She thought about how fragile love could be, how easily it could fade if left unattended, and how strong it became again when cared for. She remembered the early days of their marriage, how Daniel used to bring her flowers from the grocery store for no reason. How they danced barefoot in the kitchen after putting Ethan to bed. Somewhere along the way, life had become too busy for those little moments. But maybe love never truly leaves. It just waits quietly, hoping to be found again. When Ethan came back, she tucked him into bed. He looked up at her with sleepy eyes. "Mum," he said, "you're smiling more now." She laughed softly. "You noticed again?" He nodded. "I like when you're happy. It makes everything better." She kissed his forehead. "You're the reason I'm smiling, sweetheart." After he fell asleep, Claire went back to the window. The moon hung high, its light silver across the quiet street. She thought about Daniel's voice, the sincerity in it, the way he'd said, "I miss us." It wasn't just a sentence, it was an opening, a chance. And she was ready to take it. Her phone buzzed one last time. It was a message from Daniel. "Save me one of those cookies. I'll bring the coffee. Let's talk tomorrow night." She smiled, typing back simply, "We'll be waiting." The house was silent again. But it wasn't the kind of silence that hurt anymore. It was peaceful, comforting. The kind of quiet that comes when hearts begin to heal. Claire turned off the lights and stood at Ethan's doorway for a moment, watching him sleep. "Thank you," she whispered softly, "for reminding me what love really looks like." As she climbed into bed, she realized something beautiful. Sometimes the strongest love stories aren't about grand moments or perfect people. They're about forgiveness, rediscovery, and the courage to try again. When Daniel came home tomorrow, things wouldn't be instantly perfect, but they would be real. And that was enough. Outside, the night breeze carried the faint scent of rain. Inside, a quiet home waited, filled with hope, laughter, and the promise of new beginnings.